Now that we covered the basic outer anatomy of the brain, let's look down into the spinal cord and let's really look at how some of the nerves affect and innervate and how they're able to get the signal out of the spinal cord and receive signal through the receptors and through the afferent pathways, and how everything from the 31 pairs of spinal nerves get back to the central nervous system. So let's look at some of the basic anatomy. As you can see here, you have all of the anatomical landmarks that we learned within some of the basic anatomy, dealing with cervical vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae, lumbar, and sacral. Now that we have these areas that we learned, they can correlate now with all of the different regions that you learned. One of the things that we did learn is, you have 7 cervical vertebrae, 7, 12, and 5. But one of the things that you can see here is that there's a C8 nerve root. This reasoning is because all of these nerves come out and are named for where they come out distal or under that particular vertebrae. And so as you go down the line, you can see the different regions of the spinal cord. That is why we need that intense myelinated nerve root area, as well as the intense myelin sheath, and as we all know, that the particular Schwann cells that are needed going out to the periphery. Oligodendrocytes are within the central nervous system. So over here we can see that we have a cross-section of what your spinal cord would look like at those particular regions. Right here we're looking at what C2 would look like in the white and gray matter. Now remember from our previous talks, the gray matter is where all of the soma or the cell bodies of the neurons. The white matter, that is where all the axon and myelinated parts of the axon are going to be. Now, if you remember what the vertebral bodies look like when we showed you in the different regions, this should look very similar to what the body of the vertebrae would look like. Obviously, as you're going down, cervical vertebrae body is smaller and then much larger all the way down to when you get into lumbar area. But if you notice here in the lumbar region, it actually gets thinner, because what happens now is you have less and less nerve roots because they're going down and obviously just innervating into the lower body as well as into the sacral region. This area right here between L4 and L5 is what we have what's called the cauda equina. And if you look at it from Latin, this is actually what's called the horse tail. And if you look at it with these nerve roots, if they were actually drawn to full scale, it would look like a horse tail. That is why it's named that. It's Latin for horse tail. Cauda meaning tail, and equina, equine meaning horse. And so you have all these branches that are coming out into the sacral nerve, actually going down. It's going to be your femoral nerve, sciatic nerve, innervating all the low aspects of the lower body. But back up here into this vertebral white and gray matter, we're going to learn in the next slide what all of these particular structures are going to do. Remember, we are trying to send out signal and receive signal as far as where the nerve roots are located and what they are trying to do. Now remind you, that's why you need to keep in mind here, this is the anterior view and this is the posterior view. The anterior view, this right here, would be kind of looking at the throat and neck region, and this right here is obviously looking at your dorsal aspect or the back of this. And you can see the different areas. You still have a hole in the middle, which is called your central canal. You have your gray matter with all your bodies, the white matter with all your axon, and then you can see here how you have dorsal root, which is meaning the dorsum or the back, ventral root. Remember, we talked about ventilating or ventricular aspect or the front, and you'll see this in the next slides a little bit in more detail. So let's go to the next slide and we can actually see what a little bit more, same as the last slide. Here's a posterior view, anterior view. Here you got your gray matter, white matter, and then you have all the different nerve roots. And remember, these different nerve roots are going to be either receiving signal or sending signal. And so let's learn what each one will do as you're looking into this. So here you can see, same thing. This is another Another view, the anterior view. Here's the posterior, so this would be looking throat region, face region, and this is obviously your back. And you can see here what's kind of happening far as these roots, these dorsal ganglion roots are actually going to be bringing in signal or receiving signal from the different areas. And these different areas, obviously, soma meaning body. So you can see right here how you have your sensory, somatic and visceral, sensory visceral area, nuclei, and then you have your motor coordination. So in the back, this is where all the sensory receptors are going to be talking, all the signals coming in, whether it be hot, cold, or whether it be receiving information far as touch and where you are in space, or athletically where you are on a particular athletic field, what you need to do, whether you're trying to make that slap shot, you're trying to score that goal or throw that touchdown. And then what happens is right in here it's going to pretty much be the area of where your body would send the signal from the brain and tell it what to do. Looking at the next slide, this is what a real anatomical slide would look like within the body. A little bit different than what your animated slide would look like, but you can kind of see the darker areas. Obviously this is where the cell bodies will be located, and your white matter where all of the axons will be located. And then you can see how you have these nerve roots that are coming out, your dorsal ganglion as far as the ventral aspect or into the dorsal aspect of this region. And basically what you can see through the reading is how through different disorders that different things can be affected, whether you're dealing with a motor area, if you have damage to this area, or as far as the sensory reception in this area. And then what we'll also learn is what all those different nerve roots can do, because all of the different nerve roots that come out, if you look back, let's go back to this first slide that we showed you, they are going to pretty much innervate all of the different functions where they lie. Obviously, dealing up in here, you have a lot of the major structures in the cervical region that are going to go down and affect a lot of your upper body, not only just far as upper body as in muscle-wise, but also heart and lungs. That C4 nerve is very, very important, dealing with respiration, digestion, heart rate as you're going down through here, looking as far as in the lungs and the thoracic area, and then you have all your major muscles, all your motor and sensory going all the way down the line, to the lower body. That's why you see that these are much thinner here, because obviously you have a lot less to deal with than obviously dealing with the digestion and respiration. But down in here, they are still very thick because you still have to deal with your lower abdominal region, intestines, reproductive organs. But then now down in here, you just have to deal with the lower aspect of the body, going down into the femur, lower leg, and dealing with sensory and motor reception in those areas. So let's go back to the last slide to kind of recap what we kind of discussed, and looking at what things that we can do for spinal cord. Now, looking back on all the slides, we kind of basically learned about the anatomy and what can happen at the different regions. In the next lesson, we're going to really learn about cranial nerves and spinal nerves, and learn about how they control different aspects of the body and body control. So what I'd like to do within this assignment for this evening is, if you can find information about spinal cord and spinal cord injuries. So number one, if you can find a type of injury, there are a lot of different injuries that are out there. If you can find something about how it happened, what issues or ailments the person might be dealing with, very similar when we looked at the previous assignment about concussions, but now we're dealing with spinal cords. Are there any treatments that are available for these spinal cord injuries, whether it be at the exact time of injury, or whether it be a day, a month, a year, so on and so forth about the injury? How has their life changed? Can someone deal with a spinal cord injury? How would their lifestyle change? Do they have to change things? Does it change work? Does it change family dynamics? And then there's a lot of secondary issues, very similar to concussions, that a person may have to face. Are they dealing with depression, so to say, family issues, work issues, just general life issues? And can they live, with a spinal cord injury? How long do people live with these? Does it shorten their life? And the other thing that we'd like to do too is if you can provide research or articles about this, because very similar to what we did on concussions from your previous assignment, we're going to look at and break up into groups and hopefully be able to present our information. So just to kind of recap, once again, we're looking at the anatomy of the spinal cord. We're looking at the different regions of the spinal cord, in particular dealing with how the spinal cord, not necessarily the brain, but going back here, looking at how the spinal cord coming out of the cranium and going down into the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral regions. What we really want to research is what happens when these areas are damaged. Can you find out what maybe some of these nerve roots as far as motor and sensory control, because we're going to learn about that in the next lesson once we look at the different areas of the brain and cranial nerves, and we'll also look at these spinal cord nerves as well. But I want you to kind of get a basic anatomy and a basic idea of what can transpire. So once again, the assignment is at the end of the page on slide 5, and also I will post this on the portal, and so hopefully we'll be able to gain a better understanding of spinal